What's going on, Fastest 40 listeners? How we doing? We are right in the middle of the NFL offseason and just a couple weeks from the NFL draft. 2 weeks exactly from the NFL draft from that first round. I cannot freaking wait to see what the Kansas City Chiefs do. Um, quick shout out to our partners over at the Atlas Saloon before we get things started. Saloon out in Excelsior Springs, Missouri. That's the Northland for you guys out here in Kansas City. They've been brewing beers since, you know, I mean, it's got since 2018. They've been brewing beers in house. Keith Hudson, head brewmaster there, putting together some great stuff. Whether it's their red ale, their Kolsch. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. The 13-second ale, that one was pretty good. So all kinds of great stuff going on at the Atlas Saloon. Whether you're going there nightly, the NFL draft, I'm sure, is going to have a little bit of a crowd there for people watching to see who the Chiefs are going to take in the very first round with that 32nd overall pick. So make sure you check them out, Atlas Saloon in the Excelsior Springs. Before we really get down to the draft stuff, because it's going to start snowballing into this area where we, you know, try and forecast what the Chiefs are going to do, what Brett Veach is going to do. Um, all the trust in him for sure. I think it's definitely something worth touching on about Rashee Rice because this scenario directly impacts what the Chiefs are going to do in the NFL draft. And we saw a similar situation in 2019, right? Tyreek Hill, offseason, gets into some trouble, gets recorded. Some domestic violence scenarios start coming up. I remember it like yesterday. I was on a cruise during the most important part of NFL free agency, which play the violin for Dan on a cruise. But I didn't have any signal the entire time I'm out, and so my brother-in-law, we finally get back from the trip, and it's ping, 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 all these notifications coming through on the cell phone. Oh, the Chiefs signed Tyrann Mathieu. Oh, we did this, we did that. Oh, Tyreek Hill is in legal trouble. Then all of a sudden it was full on panic mode, right? You didn't know what was going to happen. Um, didn't know who we were going to sign, if he was going to remain with the team. We just got through dealing with the Kareem Hunt situation. There's all these question marks that are in the air, and the Chiefs, their draft needs changed. They ended up taking McCole Hardman in the second round, a pick I don't think they would have made otherwise, trying to find that prototypical guy to carry on that Tyreek Hill skill set. And here we are, 5 years later, dealing with a similar situation. Rashee Rice, phenomenal rookie year, almost 1,000 yards, Super Bowl champion. By all accounts, a man of pretty high character from what has been reported on him up to this point, right? Super generous, great teammate out of SMU, smaller school, so those humble beginnings, and he made himself a little bit of a mistake, right? Since Trey came on the show and talked about it last week, there's been new information that's shown that he was the driver of the Lamborghini vehicle. There was rumors of maybe some marijuana being on his person. Um, Not a huge deal here in Missouri, but definitely a big deal down there in Texas, regardless of how much he has. um, Rumors of a gun that ended up not being true. All these different things that came from this situation, and ultimately he fled that scene. Well, the charges for Rashee Rice have been passed down. It resulted in that six-car accident. A couple folks were hurt. Glad that they are okay. At least everything reporting shows that it was not anything too serious or life-threatening at the very least. But he made a huge mistake. Street racing with another player. One of his former teammates out of SMU was the one driving the Corvette. So, they're racing each other. They're thinking they're having a good time. Then all of a sudden, you know, life spins into this scenario that got real serious real quick, and they flaked. They bolted out of there, and now what they're both dealing with is a set of identical charges. So, Rashee Rice, collision involving injury is a felony. Felony count. Jail for no more than 5 years, $5,000 fine, potentially both of those scenarios. The other charge, collision involving serious injury, third degree felony, 2 to 10 years in jail, possible $10,000 fine, and then aggravated assault, a second-degree felony with jail time and a fine associated with it as well. All in total, 8 counts. So, a couple of those are multiple times over. I think they're accounting for each of the victims and the vehicles that are associated in this crash, and those charges carried over to the student athlete for SMU as well. What we're dealing with here is a situation where Rashee Rice has a warrant out for his arrest. Charges have been filed in this scenario. So he will be arrested, processed. They may or may not give him bail. My guess is they will. He'll be able to go out on bail, and then it's wait for the trial. Well, what we've seen the NFL do a lot of times is they're not going to pass down punishment until charges are filed. That's happened. And so there's a potential for him to end up on the commissioner's exempt list until that trial happens and sentencing is given for whatever ends up coming from that. So that's one potential scenario where we could see the commissioner exempt list keeping Rashee Rice out for the entirety of the 24 season. Another scenario, they withhold any kind of punishment. We saw that with the Alvin Kamara situation. He was charged with assault in Las Vegas. They waited until the charges were processed to hit him with his suspension. So this could be a scenario where, trials, they can take up to a year sometimes, where Rashee Rice plays out 24 with this case kind of looming. We saw a similar situation with Frank Clark as well. And then once those charges are filed and processed and he's, been, or I guess the charges have been, they stick. I'm blanking on the word there for him, but that's when you could see that potential suspension, and what that might look like, Lord only knows, right? We're in a state of the NFL where you can get a year ban for betting on a game and only 6 months for alleged domestic violence. So, there's no telling exactly where this scale is going to fall. But I think the foregone conclusion is that you cannot count on having Rashee Rice on the roster in 2024. It is not a guaranteed fact that that is going to be the case. It's not a fact that it's going to be the case, whether it be punishment or whether it be the Chiefs making a personnel decision to cut him loose. Now, I don't think the latter is going to happen. We tend to give folks a few more chances, but what this whole situation has done, right? And I don't want to ignore the impact on Rashee Rice or the folks that were actually victims in this scenario that, are going to have to deal with replacing their vehicles, healing from those injuries being the most important part. But from a strictly football perspective, the consequences here have altered the Chiefs' draft needs going into the 2024 NFL draft the same way that we saw that happen with the Tyreek Hill situation. Now, we signed Hollywood Brown. The expectation coming into 2024 was that we would have Brown, we would have Rice, we would have Travis Kelce fully healthy, and then potentially spend a later round pick on a wide receiver or pick up some sort of a veteran as we head into the regular season to round out our wide receiver room. We still have Watson on the roster. We still have Sky Moore. Technically, Kadarius Toney is still on the roster as well. But that is not enough. At least fans don't believe that's enough, right? Going into the NFL season, I say that for a team who's defending a Super Bowl title with less. So with all of that being said, I think this creates a little more urgency, at least for folks mocking up these drafts, to take a wide receiver in round one. A lot of Chiefs fans are looking for that anyway. I think Brett Veach would certainly consider it with the vast amount of talent that is available at wide receiver. And I think that might have been part of the plan initially anyway, given the nature of Marquise Brown's deal. If the Chiefs had no intentions of drafting a wide receiver, I wholeheartedly believe Hollywood Brown signs a multi-year deal. Instead, he gets a one-year contract. This may have been the plan all along again, but the Chiefs are going to have to spend considerable capital on the wide receiver position yet again because of a player's decision off the field. And you know, the Chiefs did win the Super Bowl, but it was tough. It was difficult in that wide receiver room, and you could see the frustration on Mahomes' face every week, not being able to put up the points that they're accustomed to putting up throughout the Mahomes Reed era. So that's going to be something that is absolutely a priority moving forward and has definitely moved up the list. I think in my mind before this situation, getting a left tackle bolstered on that line was a huge need. And unfortunately, that might be something where we have to patch it with, a veteran like Donovan Smith, who luckily is still available, or maybe even a reclaim project like what we've seen in the past. Taco Charlton, we brought a guy like him in, Kadarius Toney being another one of those scenarios. But Mekhi Becton, Jets left tackle, is technically a free agent as well. So there's potential for the Chiefs to go and band-aid that tackle situation and address what has now become a higher priority need in my mind, the wide receiver. Just kind of looking through some of this, the Chiefs made a move at edge rusher that tell me that that is not a huge priority for them, right? Defensive line, definitely not a big priority with Chris Jones signing. Mike Dana brought him back on a 3-year, $24 million deal, 6.5 sacks last year, hustle player. One of my favorite parts of that signing, just to do a quick side note here, was all of the footage that came out from his teammates saying that he basically has been the low-key, under-the-radar, unsung hero of the defense for this past season. He's a huge piece in that locker room. You can tell by the way those guys were talking about him, and he's going to make a huge impact in the locker room and on the field next year when we bring him back. So I'm really happy about Mike Dana, but that tells me that that significant draft capital is going to be spent either wide receiver or offensive tackle to keep bolstering that side of the ball. We've been defensive heavy the last couple years. 2 first-round picks in 2020, spent them both on defense, getting our corner and defensive edge rusher of the future, Karlaftis and McDuffie. And it didn't even stop there. Defensive players kept coming in 2023, getting FAU. Looking forward to seeing more of what he does this year. But the way the NFL draft is going to play out, I think we could absolutely see wide receiver or tackle coming off the board the first couple of rounds, right? We're picking 32, 64. A lot of mocks have us taking one of those back-end talent type of wide receivers. Names like Xavier Worthy out of Texas with his impressive record-setting fastest 40 time. Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. Love that kid. Love his route running ability. His hands are great. Adonai Mitchell out of Texas, the bigger bodied gentleman out there. Keon Coleman in Florida State. Troy Franklin, kind of one of those under the radar wide receiver guys for Kansas City. And then there's a handful of offensive tackles that might fall to us as well. Now, a fan favorite here locally is the defensive lineman out of Missouri, Darius Robinson. If for whatever reason we take another Mizzou kid, I'm going to be ecstatic. I'm going to be pumped. The talent coming out of Mizzou right now is impeccable, and I think that's only going to continue to improve with what we've seen with NIL. But I absolutely see receiver being that priority for the Kansas City Chiefs. Ladd McConkey, Xavier Worthy, and Keon Coleman are my personal favorites for the Chiefs to take. And each of those guys kind of have their own separate skill set that I think would add a nice flavor to this offense. Looking at the future rounds, some other guys that we might see or trade up for, or one of those type of scenarios, getting defensive back help is something that can play out with the departure of L'Jarius Sneed. Ennis Rankstraw, another Missouri guy that I'd really love to see us bring in. Talented kid out of Columbia Mo there. But everything we're seeing from this Rashee Rice situation is just cascading down into what the Chiefs are going to have to do. And it's definitely, if we didn't see an impact on the wide receiver position in these mock drafts that are coming out from guys like McShay, Mel Kiper, the big names in college space. Wide receiver is certainly going to headline it now. What I am interested in is the scenario for trading up. The way wide receiver talent is going to be falling off the board in a hurry in this draft between picks, basically pick 4 until we get to the back end of round 1 at pick 32. There's going to be a high volume and need for wide receivers, and they're going to be flying off the board furiously. My question is whether or not we have enough capital to make that move and jump up, right? We trade L'Jarius Sneed, we get ourselves a 3rd-round pick, but it's not for this draft. It's for next year, and that's not to say we can't use that as ammunition to move up. But I could absolutely see some of these other needy teams coming in and snagging a wide receiver ahead of the Chiefs, kind of like what the Chiefs have done to the Bills in years past, leapfrogging them to grab McDuffie. They end up with Kyer Elam. I could absolutely see the Bills taking advantage of their draft position to grab a wide receiver. If anyone recalls, they just traded Stephon Diggs away. Right now, as it sits, Curtis Samuel is wide receiver 1 out there in Buffalo. I guess if you want to throw what's his name, the kid from Florida in there, Khalil Shakur, as their number 1, maybe he might be that guy. But they're going to need a wide receiver too, as well. A wide receiver 1, more likely, is what that person will be. And they're not alone. The AFC is going to, I mean, it's an arms race. We see it every year in the NFL offseason. Everyone's trying to keep up with the Chiefs, better each other, best each other, rather, so that they can take that Lamar Hunt trophy home and represent the conference in the Super Bowl. And no one has been able to surpass the Chiefs in that front since 2019, except for the Cincinnati Bengals. So it's still a hurdle for these up-and-coming contenders. Teams like Baltimore, who had a really good opportunity, they're going to need a wide receiver. Zay Flowers is there, Mark Andrews is there, but OBJ is a free agent. They had some other guys depart, Devin Duvernay being a big one for them, signing with Jacksonville, I believe. You look over to the Bengals, T. Higgins is on a tag. They might be looking to backfill that position, as well as Tyler Boyd, who's currently a free agent. You keep on moving through the AFC, right? The Chargers traded Keenan Allen. They cut Mike Williams. Quentin Johnson is not going to be that number 1 guy, and they're picking inside the top 6. There's a lot of scenarios that are going to see wide receivers falling off the board, and the Chiefs have to make sure that they're in a position that they can move up if they need to. Now, what does that look like? How many spots can they really move up? I don't know what that capital breaks down to, as in terms of flexibility that they're going to have. But it's going to be something that, us fans are going to need to watch as we head towards the draft, right? The rumors for trades start coming out. Teams start getting desperate as you get closer to that day. And all of those moves will start getting made the night of, where you're going to see these big swings. And with what we've seen with Rashee Rice and the way this situation has played out up to this point, the Chiefs may have to be in a position where they take a big swing to get their guy and supplement that wide receiver room. So, pretty disappointed. Pretty disappointed that this happened with Rashee Rice, for sure. Glad everyone is healthy and okay, right? We've seen what can happen when it gets a little more serious in these situations, but luckily that was not the case here. And, you just hope he learns from it, bounces back on his feet, and becomes a better man because of it. But at the end of the day, he put his team in a really difficult position at the same time. And it's something that the front office is going to need to sort out as we move through these next 2 weeks. So a lot of fun checking in with you guys and kind of talking through what's going on in Chiefs Kingdom. And as we gear up for the draft, we're going to have some fun stuff. The week of the draft, Trey will be back in town. He's out on duty. Appreciate you serving for us there, Trey. It'll be me again next week. But then the week after that, it'll be draft week, baby, and we can start talking about who do we think the Chiefs are going to take, what are some of those rumors looking like, and then the week after the draft, we get to recap it, and we'll have some surprises on that end as we kind of move through the month of May at that point, which May gets here. We're only 4 months away from the season, so just keep counting those days down as we get closer to the 2024 kickoff. That's going to be taking place in Kansas City. I'm ready for the schedule release, training camp, all that good stuff. But until then, let's get to the NFL draft. Appreciate you all listening. We'll catch you again next week with some more in-depth draft talk. So see you then. Peace.